they were worried and concerned about the lights because they were seeing more and more lights showing up every year.
What's up, beautiful people? Welcome to another episode of Hollercast. We're so glad you're with us. And these are my favorite podcasts that we do here. I've got a really cool scientific discussion and in-depth conversation behind the Brown Mountain Lights. We're have the pleasure of being joined by Mr. Alex Glover and Mr. Ed Spear. And Ed is the author of The Brown Mountain Lights, History, Science, and Human Nature Explains an Appalachian Mystery. And we're so grateful to have him here, and this is going to be an awesome conversation. But before we get started, let's take a minute to thank our sponsors.
Hollercast is proud to partner on our first community fundraising effort, Give Keith a Good Leg to Stand On. Keith Stewart is a member of the community who has had several life-changing medical diagnoses arise this past year. He was diagnosed with stage 3 laryngeal cancer and has had to have his voice box removed as part of the treatment. Also, due to complications with neuropathy, he has wounds that cannot heal and needed a below-the-knee leg amputation. Throughout all this, he stays strong and proud, missing his life of being able to speak and walk. Keith is a kind-hearted soul and has always been a helping hand to others, and now he is in need of a helping hand himself. His savings has been depleted due to the overwhelming cost of the surgeries and medical bills. The funds raised will be used to pay for a prosthetic leg, an electric wheelchair, making his home handicap accessible, as well as a permanent voice box implant. Please visit the link in the description below to donate and help give Keith a good leg to stand on.
This episode of Hollercast is brought to you by Big Al's Pack and Ship. Located off Roan Road in downtown Spruce Pine, right next to Webb Funeral Home, Big Al's is your full-service shipping solution, shipping out UPS, FedEx, as well as DHL. In addition to shipping services, Big Al also offers copy and fax support, notary public services, and is Spruce Pine's go-to source for U-Haul truck and trailer rental. If you're looking to ship out a package, mention promo code HOLLERCAST at checkout to receive 5% off. Again, that's promo code HOLLERCAST to receive 5% off shipping services. Big Al's Pack and Ship. Make ship happen. This episode of Hollercast is sponsored by Moondust Lounge, Spruce Pine's only dedicated bar room and live music venue. Located at 116 Oak Avenue downtown, Moondust Lounge offers a variety of fun activities for all ages, including weekly karaoke, dance parties, and live music of all genres. Find Moondust Lounge on Instagram or Facebook for a full listing of the week's activities, and mention promo code HOLLERCAST at the bar for 50% off your first beverage. Again, that's promo code HOLLERCAST at the bar for 50% off your first beverage. Moondust Lounge. Get dusted.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Hollercast. Chase, I'm super excited about this.
Dude.
This is going to be a really interesting topic because I've largely been agnostic my entire life of the Brown Mountain Lights. No idea what causes them. So I'm really interested to dig into this. Dude. So one of our guests here, so we got Alex Glover and, tell me your name again.
Ed Spear.
Ed Spear. So you wrote a book. I'm going to go to Chase now. Chase, we got a good question for you first.
So I'll get us started here, gentlemen. Way up on Old Linville Mountain where the bear and the catamount reign, a strange ghostly light appears every night, which no scientist or hunter can explain. Reads the classic bluegrass ballad. Guys, the Brown Mountain Lights are truly an age-old mystery, and it sounds like both of you as scientists have taken a legitimate shot at explaining this mystery. What prompted you to take up this task and form the Brown Mountain Lights Research Project? And can you give us brief overview for those who may not be familiar with what the Brown Mountain Lights are and why it's persistent in the folklore of our area? Go ahead.
Well, I grew up in McDowell County, and so I heard about the Brown Mountain Lights when I was just a little kid. And so it's always been a part of my childhood and my growing up. So I was delighted to have the opportunity to investigate the Brown Mountain Lights. So only after I retired and moved back to McDowell County did I have the time and the opportunity to do the kind of research which is covered in the book.
Gotcha. And what's your background, Ed?
Well, I'm a geologist.
Okay.
I decided when I was very young that I wanted to become a geologist, and so that meant I had to leave McDowell County. So I went away to college and school and other places and ended up with a bachelor's degree from Missouri School of Mines, and then went on out to Arizona and got myself a master's degree in geology, and then started working. And I worked for mining companies that were looking for ore deposits. So it's what we call exploration geology.
Gotcha.
Minerals and rocks, right up my alley. That's exactly what I wanted to do.
Sure.
So I traveled all over the world for a career and looking for copper deposits, gold deposits, lead deposits, silver deposits, mercury deposits, and ended up the last 15 years of my life doing diamond exploration in various places around the world.
Ooh, that had to be fun.
It was an exciting, exciting career. Sure was.
Sure. Awesome. And Alex, you are our first guest on this podcast, and it's awesome to have you back, but remind everybody your background.
Well, I like Ed, I found an early liking to geology, and I finished at University of Georgia with a bachelor's degree and went immediately to work and worked for Georgia Marble Company, Vulcan Materials Company, Zemex Industrial Minerals that owned the Feldspar Corporation at that time, and ended up with Active Minerals International out of Baltimore.
Gotcha.
And so, like Ed, I'm retired too after a full career of mining and geology.
Gotcha. And you guys found each other before this Brown Mountain Lights research project, or why don't you tell me how this whole thing came to be, the Brown Mountain Lights research project?
We've known each other for a long time. Ed is worked with my companies before consulting, and we met, I guess, at some professional society organizations, and we've known each other for about 30 years. But the way it kind of started is that there was a symposium in Burke County. The EDC of Burke County was doing a symposium on Brown Mountain Lights. And so I and another guy, I didn't know Mike Fisher at the time, but I went to hear what was going on because I'd seen them many times, or been to look for them many times.
Right.
And when I heard some of the speakers, I thought, this ain't right. Some of this is just totally wrong. And so Mike and I were talking and said, let's look at this more.
Right.
And so that night we decided let's get a group of people and investigate what really is there, what kind of rocks are there that could make a light, if there is such, what kind of phenomenon exists there that could make a light, what are the lights, what is a mystery light. So shortly after, I called Ed and John Madry, another geologist, friends of mine, great friends of mine, really great professionals. And I said, would y'all like to join this team? And a team started. And then we had people like Dr. Cato Holler from Marion joined us, who's one of the most well-known cave experts in the world. And then we had the astronomer from Appalachian State. I'm trying to remember his name, Ed.
Caton.
Yeah, Dr. Caton. Joined us, and so we had some historical people join us, some other scientists joined us. I think it was a group of about 7 or 8 people. And it's been going on for really about, and still going on for about six years now.
Wow. Okay. So, Ed, the subtitle of your book is History, Science, and Human Nature Explaining Appalachian Mystery. It sounds like you had a little bit of everybody represented in the group that undertook this. Why don't you, so is it best to start and if we want to just cover the history of it?
Okay.
Which is the first one here under your under your subtitle.
Yes. Yeah.
When was the first mention? I know, just from my own knowledge of it, I think it was like right around 1913 or something was the first undertaking, a scientific undertaking, to try to look at this phenomena. And my understanding it was reported for roughly 2 years before that. Am I somewhere in the neighborhood?
Yes, you certainly are. So 1911, 1912, 1913 were very critical in the legend of the Brown Mountain Lights.
Okay.
The first thing ever published about the Brown Mountain Lights was published in 1912. And this was some local newspaper articles. And the story they were telling was that there was a government geologist was coming from Washington to investigate the Brown Mountain Lights to try to figure out what they were.
Okay.
And this occurred because the locals in the area had been seeing lights for a previous number of years,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't know what was causing those lights.
Gotcha.
So they were worried and concerned about the lights because they were seeing more and more lights showing up every year. So sure enough, they imposed upon the politicians of North Carolina to do something about these lights.
Mm-hmm.
The politicians of North Carolina actually contacted the U.S. Congress and imposed upon the U.S. Congress to do something about these lights. The U.S. Congress then asked the U.S. Geological Survey to send a geologist down there to Burke County and figure out what's causing these lights.
Right.
And so that's what the first newspaper articles were about. And this was really the beginning of the heyday of the legend of the Brown Mountain
Sure.
Lights.
So would I be correct to assume that time period sort of coincides with industrialization of this area?
Yes, you certainly would.
Okay. So do you have any sense so if these people are seeing lights, other than the fact that they probably haven't seen lights in those areas for however long they've lived there, why do you think the level to go to the government and say, hey, what's going on here? Do you have any sense where that was?
Yes. In 1911, Jules Verne published a book in English. The book had actually been written in French and was first published in 1904. It was published in English in 1911. The first chapter of that book tells us everything we want to know about the Brown Mountain Lights. This was a science fiction book. It was the story of a mad scientist who was building a unique flying machine at a rocky mountaintop just north of Morganton, North Carolina.
Okay.
Jules Verne's never visited North Carolina in his lifetime. So he could not have heard about the legend of the Brown Mountain Lights before he wrote this book in 1904. He wrote a lot of other books and became the most famous author in the world.
And what was that? What was the name of that book?
The last book he wrote is the one I'm talking about here, is called The Master of the Universe.
Okay.
And it's the story of Robert Le Conquereur, who was the mad scientist who was building this flying machine. And in the first chapter of this book, the locals around Table Rock, just north of Morganton, North Carolina, were seeing lights for the first time, and it scared them. And so they asked the North Carolina politicians to do something about these lights. The North Carolina politicians asked the U.S. Congress to do something about these lights. The U.S. Congress sent an investigator, and that's the story told in the first chapter of this science fiction novel.
Okay.
So that event the book was published in English in 1911. In 1912, the U.S. Congress really did send a geologist down here because the local residents were concerned about the increasing number of lights that they were seeing.
So are we sure that that book could have made it here?
Oh, yes, it did.
Okay.
And so there's a good possibility that that book was the beginning of the legend of the Brown Mountain.
Well, it seems awful coincidental, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
I got you.
And mention, Ed, about the fact, too, and this is where a lot of misinformation has come to us, that many people said it was the legend that came from Native Americans. But our research disproved that.
That was going to be one of my next questions. So, yeah,
yes.
we can go into that.
Yeah. So, in the history of the Brown Mountain Lights, we find that the first electricity in western North Carolina occurred in Hickory in 1888. So over the next 12 years, by 1900, electricity had spread throughout the Catawba River Valley. These are the lights that the local residents around Brown Mountain were seeing. They really were seeing lots of new lights. And these are the lights that concerned them enough that they imposed upon the North Carolina politicians to do something about these lights.
Sorry, I burped there in the middle of that, and I'm so sorry.
It's all good.
Okay, so largely these stories of the Native Americans seeing the Brown Mountain Lights, and so you said to me earlier when we were talking before that you verified that. Can you tell us how you verified it?
Yes, there was the first time in published literature that it mentions that the Brown Mountain Lights were seen by early Americans was in 1927. The Brown Mountain Light legend was already 40 years old by then, but this is the first time people started talking about the lights were seen before the days of electricity. But it turns out that is total misinformation. There was a lot of books written about the remarkable rugged mountains of western North Carolina, written by adventurers in the 1800s. And these adventurers were coming to Burke County and Yancey County and so forth, and they were hiring local guides to take them out and show them Linville Gorge and the waterfalls and the rocky cliffs and so forth. Many of these books, and they're all covered in my book here, were written in the 1800s, but not a single one of them mentions mystery lights. Not a single one of those 18 books published in the 1800s. The first time anything was published about the Brown Mountain Lights was in 1912. But interestingly, we do have one light that was seen before the days of electricity. This was Fate Wiseman's light that he saw from Wiseman's View. That's the reason it's called Wiseman's View,
right.
The overlook on Linville Gorge. He saw a light beginning probably in 1858. And he describes the light that he saw as an instantaneous flash of light at the same location and occurring over different flashes occurring over a period of an hour, and the location would move. It was not a continuous light, but it was a single flash of light. Okay. In 1858, the first train ever to operate in western North Carolina began operation, and it began runs from Statesville to Morganton. And so later in the investigation of the Brown Mountain Lights, investigators found that they could see that train coming around the curves as it on its nightly runs.
And like going in and out of the trees and...
Exactly. So that's the light that Fate Wiseman saw beginning in 1858. But that did not create the legend of the Brown Mountain Lights. It's the legend of the Brown Mountain Lights, not the legend of the Brown Mountain Light.
Yes.
So Fate Wiseman, for 40 years before the days of electricity, was seeing a light occasionally off in the distance. But there was no legend of the Brown Mountain Lights until the local residents started seeing multiple lights burning all night long and an increasing number of these lights after 1888. And by 1900, people were seeing lights. They didn't talk about them until it was published in 1912, but they talked about having seen lights in previous years.
Sure.
And you can backtrack that to about 1900.
Sure. Okay.
Wow.
I know. I'm already blown away. So, okay. So let's back up just a little bit. So science is the next term under that. I wanted to let's go back to the Jules Verne book for a moment.
Okay.
Alex, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, if you look at Table Rock, it's a very unique geological feature, obviously, just to the untrained eye. What are some of the unique geological features of Linville Gorge and Table Rock and all that stuff?
Well, Chase, Table Rock didn't come from there. Table Rock was pushed to its current location. It's the Chilhowie quartzite. If you go up to Table Rock, you'll see that it's a hard sandstone. It's a recrystallized sandstone. It has been metamorphosed into a quartzite. And it's so weather resistant, that's why it forms somewhat of a knob. That's why the cliffs are there at Wiseman's View. They're also Chilhowie, but it was pushed up there. It's kind of like a large, thick book sitting on a substrate that it's not attached to, so it just sits up there. But the geology of the gorge includes the Wilson Creek gneiss. Some of that is there, and over on Brown Mountain and in Wilson Creek. The Wilson Creek gneiss is 1.2 billion years old. It's old material. The Cranberry gneiss is there. It's 1.2 billion years old. The Grandfather Mountain Complex rocks are there. They're mainly quartzites and some cobblestone, 750 million years old. These are old rocks. Chilhowie quartzites, 540 million years old. The Shady Dolomite, which is on the bottom, where Baxter is, where Woodlawn is.
Sure.
That's a 500 million year old carbonate. And then you've got the Linville Falls Fault that impacted those areas later, and that's what pushed the top of Table Rock to where its location currently is. That was 300 million years ago. And then you've got the Brevard Fault that is the escarpment for between the valley and the whole mountain ridge, and that's 350 million years old. So
needless to say, it's unique.
It is, and we looked at the composition of those rocks, the morphology of those rocks, many aspects of those rocks. We looked at radioactivity, anything that could cause a scientific light.
Right.
And we just didn't find anything there that existed.
Right. So I don't know if you've heard this, Josh, but everything I've ever heard about the Brown Mountain Lights, that the prevailing scientific explanation, as I've always been told, is ball lightning or some sort of release of gas.
Yeah, that's exactly what
that
I've
is
heard.
trapped in the thing. And I've also heard things like they're more likely to appear after it rains or something like. Is there any geological feature about Linville Gorge or that area that you found that could be the cause of something like this?
No, sir. None of these rocks are gas producing. There are no, we even heard of earthquake lights. I forgot what that word, there's a word for that, Ed, but none of these faults are inactive. They're old prehistorical faults that are not active. And there are some swamp gases there that may be there, but there's nothing really to ignite it.
That was exactly what I was getting ready to say. Even if there was a gas deposit that released, you have to have ignition.
Yeah, you have to have some source, right?
Yeah.
So what about like electromagnetism, things like that?
We looked at all of that.
Radiation.
We even had when I attended the forum in Burke County, we had an individual. I'm not going to mention his name, but he was a paranormal speaker.
Yep.
And his idea was that the water was running through these really pure dolomites of the Shady Dolomite, and that the spruce pine quartz was also there, providing a source for electricity,
Right.
and that the water flowing through these would cause a spark. And I even told him that the spruce pine quartz and the spruce pine pegmatites don't exist in the gorge or Wilson Creek. They don't go that far east, so they don't exist.
Right.
And the fact that water's flowing readily through the shady could be a fact, because that's where Baxter gets their water.
Sure.
Their pure water. But a lot of the things that were said at the forum were just absolutely non-scientific.
And for anyone who doesn't know, that Alex is the foremost expert on the spruce pine pegmatite and the mining in this area specifically. Yep. See our first podcast.
Yep.
So anything else you looked at?
Well,
that would be
we
interesting,
looked
geologically speaking, that is.
That's mostly it
Right.
geologically, but we looked at biology, we looked at physics, just anything. And Ed's got a neat list where he goes through all of those, and each one of those is found to be non-existent.
Okay.
Except for the firefly, and we'll talk about that.
Okay. All right. So, Ed, anything? So we talked about the lights being seen right around industrialization. Can you give us sort of from there going forward a little bit? I know there was some, if I remember correctly, there were some scientific studies that were undertaken in like the 60s and things like that. Is that correct?
Yes.
The Geological Survey did those, right?
Yes. The first two government surveys were done in 1912 and again in 1922. And that pretty well, they didn't find anything except man-made lights and forest fires. And that pretty well killed the legend of the Brown Mountain Lights. But of course, the local residents persisted, and the legend has survived and continues even now. The survey that we did is the most detailed survey investigation that's ever been done on the Brown Mountain Lights. And as Alex was just pointing out, we covered all kinds of every possible scenario of what's been proposed to have caused Brown Mountain Lights. And you mentioned ball lightning, and that's an interesting one.
Okay.
Now, ball lightning is a scientific theory, and it does exist. It has been reported in a number of cases around the world, but it is extremely rare. Extremely rare. It's much too rare to be the source of the lights that people are seeing
all the time. Yeah.
All the time and every single night of the year. But ball lightning is, we put that in the 1% classification of possible lights that could be existing, that could be causing, and it would cause confusion.
So let me ask you about this before we move on. So I've seen a couple of people say that not only have they saw the lights in the distance, but they've seen the lights in the parking lot or coming over their car, or I've heard those. Yeah. I've heard those from people. My first thought on that was ball lightning. Is what do you think about that?
I don't suspect anyone has seen ball lightning over Brown Mountain. It is that rare.
Okay.
Now, we have seen lightning, and I have been at an overlook one night when lightning was going on, and there were people there calling those the Brown Mountain Lights. So,
all right.
Everyone, there's going to be someone who always misinterprets what they see.
Sure.
But the ball lightning, I don't think is a valid explanation for the thousands of lights which are seen continuously.
Okay.
Now, you were mentioning something there about the legend of the Brown Mountain Lights has changed over time. So it's a little over 100 years old, the legend itself. In the initial legend, there were no aerial lights. All of the lights seen were on the ground, and they weren't moving. Or if they were moving, it was very slowly and not very far.
Right.
Now, people are talking about lights in the sky. They're talking about aerial lights over the top of the mountains. They're talking about lights in the Linville Gorge down below the overlooks and lights that are moving. And people are talking about lights that they encounter up close. Whereas in the early days, what started the legend of the Brown Mountain Lights were distant lights, not up close lights. So what has happened? Obviously, man has changed over this 120 years. And there is a phenomenon, a medical condition that's referred to as nature deficit disorder. And obviously over time, our population has become less familiar and less comfortable with nature as our modern technology life takes us further and further away from nature. And this is part of what's in the book, in the subtitle there. We finally ended up with human nature has a big impact on the legend of the Brown Mountain Lights.
Right, sure.
So people are misinterpreting what they see. They think they're. I come up with some estimates on the lights. 98% of the reported mystery lights are misidentified man-made lights. So these are lights that were not expected. They were in unusual places, or they occurred at unusual times, and the observers are convinced that they are some sort of supernormal or paranormal lights. 98%. 1% of the lights that people are seeing, again, these are just my estimated percentages. 1% of the lights are natural lights. Yes, there are natural lights. There is lightning. There's also luminescent mushrooms, foxfire, and
foxfire.
And that has been reported.
Yeah, I was going to ask about bioluminescence, if that could be a part of this.
Exactly. And there's also bioluminescent insects, which we got into quite a bit, and it's covered in the book in big time.
Fireflies.
Fireflies. Well, everyone knows what a firefly...
Or lightning bugs, as we like to call them.
Yes, lightning bug.
So we all think, oh, no, we know what lightning bugs are. I would not be misled by a lightning bug. Oh, wait a minute. Stop right here. There is a lightning bug called the blue ghost firefly. And most of us are not familiar with the blue ghost firefly. We did a lot of research and for the book. And the blue ghost firefly is so unique. It will scare the bejeebas out of you the first time you see it. It is not yellow. It is blue. It does not blink.
It's a digital firefly. That's what it is.
It does not blink. It turns its light on for 60 seconds and flies around with its light on. Now, when you see thousands of these at one time, yes, it can scare the bejeebas out of you. We have reports of people climbing the trees to get away from these lights because it's so scary. Do these lights occur in this area? Yes, they do.
So those are found in Linville Gorge?
Yes.
They're found here in Mitchell County.
Wow.
Yeah. So they're not everywhere all the time. They're isolated, but there are populations of thousands. You can see thousands at a time.
Are these the ones that people take the tours to go see?
Yeah,
Is that what these are?
State Forest.
Okay, yeah. Okay, all right.
There are other fireflies that people are taking the tours over in the Smokies to see.
Right.
That's the synchronous firefly.
Yes, those are the ones I've heard of.
That's
Yes, you're
right.
right. Okay.
That again is a unique firefly, but it's yellow and it's similar to the normal firefly.
Right.
We actually found out there's 19 different species of lightning bugs or fireflies here in western North Carolina.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Some
Okay.
of them don't even blink. They don't even light up, but they're still related. But anyway, each firefly has its own unique light pattern and has its own unique environment. Some stay close to the ground, some stay up about 5 feet, some fly up in the trees. Some fly when they're all temperature sensitive, and like the blue ghost firefly is so scary when you see it. It interacts with the person. It is so light sensitive that if you turn your flashlight on, boom, they turn off. They're gone until you turn your flashlight off. So people think that this is an alien light that's interacting with them. The blue ghost firefly also is so light sensitive it won't fly and it won't blink or glow when there's a moon out. In fact, it's so sensitive to starlight that it occurs it stays in the shadows.
And I've always heard that the best time to see the lights are when the moon's not out. On a clear night when the moon's not out. Okay.
So the blue ghost firefly is deep in the forest, and it's not out in a yard like normal fireflies that most people are thinking about.
Old growth timber.
Old growth timber, yes, where it's dark. The blue ghost firefly also zigzags. It's dark, but it's flying with its light on, and it's in the dense trees. So it is flying around the trees. It is avoiding the trees that it's encountering. So this zigzag pattern, some people have interpreted to be the lights are interacting with the person. Like I say, you turn your flashlight on, or if you have a flashlight, you won't see them at all.
And that's why people don't see them. They go in the woods with a flashlight. Whenever there's a flashlight on, they don't turn on. And they only fly about 5 or 6 feet off the ground. Sometimes 2 feet off the ground.
Right.
But you think they're little fairies flying around. When I first saw them, I thought, whoa.
Yeah.
Well, and you give that kind of thing, you even think of that, like if you're taking a picture of a faraway mountain, perspective is everything at that point. So what happens what if the firefly's not actually on the mountain, but is close to the camera?
When you're at Wiseman's View and you're looking out, this firefly may be a few feet from you, but you think it's on the other mountain.
Oh, wow.
There's pictures in the book of the blue ghost firefly and the synchronous firefly, the one that you mentioned.
That's crazy. See if we can show that. You can see it.
Wow.
That's crazy. Yeah, I would freak out if that happened to me in the middle of the woods at night in the dark.
It is freaky.
Yeah.
The first time you see, and I'm very familiar and experienced in the woods, and I never saw them until someone showed them to me a few years ago.
Wow.
Are any of y'all familiar with the man who shot Liberty Valance? Okay, so there's a quote in that book: "When the legend becomes fact, print the legend." I wonder how much of this, the Brown Mountain Lights, is just a big long game of telephone. Are you familiar with the game of telephone, where you get a bunch of kids together and you tell one of them something and they whisper it in their ears until it comes back around to you, and then it's completely different. Yeah.
All of it is, John.
Is a good example of that is Paul Revere. So Paul Revere never actually existed.
Yeah.
His name was Israel Bissell.
Really?
Yeah. Paul Revere was no one.
But Paul Revere sounds better, though.
It sounds, Israel
like
Bissell sounds
America.
like a Israeli vacuum cleaner.
Yeah.
And he didn't really ride all that distance. I think he rode like 2 miles.
Right.
It's all nonsense, but it sounds good. And
it does.
It's an American that's apple pie.
Yep.
It's as American as apple pie. And I think the Brown Mountain Lights are kind of in that same vein.
Well, and that was going to be, and I know that's part of your book here. What did you find other examples? I mean, there's probably countless now that I really think about it, of where this sort of physical phenomenon and this mystery, this historical mystery, sort of intertwine in the human psyche. And then all of a sudden, this is just stuck in the folklore and of every area. I mean, I'm sure that's a part of the book, right?
Yeah.
And that's the last part of it, human nature, right?
That's what we ended up with, is human nature is such an integral part of the Brown Mountain Light legend that it probably is similar to what Joss was just talking about, is people like to believe and have magical thinking and fanciful thinking and paranormal thinking, and this is right up their alley.
Well, what would you say to people who say that's a bummer, Ed?
They do all the time. They get mad at
It's a
us.
bummer.
That's what scientists do. We're professional bubble poppers.
Right.
Yeah. So in my opinion, the book is not going to stop the legend of the Brown Mountain Lights.
Sure.
It's a good reference book. It covers it covers the topic very well, I think, and presents a lot of very valid. There's over 100 photographs in the book of lights that people are seeing, and it identifies every one of those lights. And
So okay, let me stop you there. Let me ask you a question. So Charles Braswell, was he a part of your research project?
He is.
Okay.
He's still a part of our research program.
Okay. Now he took one of probably the best photographs of the Brown Mountain Lights I've ever seen, for sure. And I've seen lots of them. I've captured it myself a few times actually. Is that the best picture? And here's my next question to you. That appears to be above the mountain.
Yes. Very nice. Very good observation. Charles was probably photographing a helicopter, which we know do fly in the area. So it was a strange light. Here's another photograph of the most unusual light I ever saw. I was on Brown Mountain one night doing our staged light test, and a low-flying airplane flew over. Now, this is after dark, and this airplane is only 100 feet above the trees.
Mm-hmm.
But this plane, and if I had not been on Brown Mountain, we would never know what to call that light. But it was picked up by our camera, the camera that's running all night long.
Mention the cameras, Ed, because we've not talked about the actual cameras.
That's
Yeah,
right.
and that's Charles was an ex-NASA photographer, right?
Yes.
And I thought I read a little bit about that for him. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you had some real experts on this.
We sure did.
Yeah.
We had Dr. Caton, the astronomer from Appalachian
Dan
State.
Caton.
Dan Caton. Had two special light-sensitive comet hunting cameras that he set up, and they ran all night long, every single night. One camera was overlooking Brown Mountain from Jonas Ridge, and the other camera was set up looking up Linville Gorge. So both of these cameras were mounted on the roofs of private homes. And the cameras were remotely controlled, and the cameras taking time-lapse photographs. One camera was doing 30-second photographs, and the other one was doing 60-second photographs. So it's a continuous photographic record every single night, all night long. Both of these cameras ran for at least 4 years, and every night or every day, Dr. Caton's graduate students would compile the previous night's time-lapse photographs into a 15-minute video and posted it on YouTube. They can still be found to this day on YouTube every single night for 4 years.
Over 1 million images.
Wow. Every night for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay.
Over 6 million images. And that's what a lot of the photographs in the book also come from those
Sure.
those cameras. Anyway, this light that I saw on Brown Mountain that night.
And this looks to be from pretty high up, right?
Yes, the camera is up at elevation.
Okay, gotcha.
Looking down, and I'm down here. My flashlight is in there too.
Okay.
But this, I recognized the plane when it flew over. It was so low when it came across the clearing where I was camping. I recognized it's a twin otter, which is an unusual aircraft. It's very unusual. It's like a Mercedes, Harley Davidson motorcycle. It has a unique sound and it has a unique look. You're not going to mistake it for anything else. I have done geological research in the Arctic using
That very plane.
that very plane.
Okay. So
So it dawned on me, and the plane flew away. I thought it was crashing. After dark, the plane is only 100 feet off the ground. It actually dove down into the valley, staying 100 feet off the ground, and I thought
in the middle of the night.
yes, I thought it was crashing. Well, because it was a twin-engine aircraft, it dawned on me the next day, wait a minute, there are no twin-engine twin otters in this part of the world. I bet you we can find where that plane came from.
Right.
It took 2 phone calls for us to find the airport where that plane came from.
Right.
It's the U.S. Army. Every December, they fly a twin otter out of the Hickory Airport doing low elevation mountainous flight training for their pilots using infrared goggles.
Really?
So that's the source of this light,
Right.
which would have been a totally mystery light to us, even though we had a camera recording the whole thing.
Right.
Because it disappears below the mountaintop.
Right.
And there's This is photographs of helicopters, medevac helicopters flying into the hospital in Lenoir. So some people do talk about seeing lights flying over the top of Brown Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
It's the medevac helicopter going.
Mention where the airports are. I think you mentioned a little bit, but where the two airports are that we're seeing aircraft coming in and out of.
Okay, sure. There's the Hickory Airport, which the airport itself is not visible from the overlooks, the observation sites. But there's also the Foothills Regional Airport, which is halfway between Lenoir and Morganton. Again, planes are flying in and out of there. And then we can also see the Statesville Airport. We can't really see the airport, but we can see the plane once it gets 100 feet up in the air. So there are photographs here in my book showing planes flying in and out of those airports.
Wow. So this was obviously a very extensive research project.
Yeah, we tried to cover everything.
Right.
But our team is still looking for even more lights that we cannot identify.
Right.
There's people on our team who are still convinced that there are mystery lights out there, and that we're all shocked that what we found was so many misidentified man-made lights.
Right.
Ed mentioned the ATV lights at the Brown Mountain ATV Park
Yes.
that ride at night.
Yes. So most people are not aware that on top of Brown Mountain itself, we've actually had people at the overlooks tell us, you can't get to the top of Brown Mountain. It's a wilderness. Nope. It is the largest maintained off-road vehicle recreation area in the eastern United States. There's 35 miles of maintained trails just for ATVs.
Really?
Yes, and there's pictures of them here in the book. Then, but of those 35 miles, there's only 2 miles in which from the overlooks that you can see lights.
Right.
And we documented those. We walked the trails ourselves. We rode the trails. We had cameras set up. We've documented all of that. Another thing that people keep telling us is, oh, people can't get down in, you can't have lights down in, those can't not be human because humans cannot get down into Linville Gorge.
And the side of Table Rock, going up the side of Table Rock, exactly where the trail is.
Exactly. There's actually, in Linville Gorge itself, there's 33 miles of maintained trails. There's so many people hiking those trails that you have to have a permit for 2/3 of the year. So when people tell me, oh, you can't get down into Linville Gorge, so those cannot be man-made lights, I know I'm talking to people who don't understand what the facts are.
Right. Anything else that you want to cover? You got a few of them.
Tell about the High Brighton Star.
Yes. Okay. From the overlooks, the Highway 181 Brown Mountain Overlook and the Wiseman View Overlooks are the two that
the two of them. Yep.
I'm talking about. There is a light that shows up on a peak near Lenoir, and let me see if there's radio towers on top of that peak, and this light that shows up, I'm not going to find it there.
Oh, that's all good.
It shows up at Easter. Suddenly, when just a few days before Easter, there's a bright light on top of that mountain. Well, I was at the Wiseman's View Overlook one night, and I saw that light. I'd never seen that light before, but I can't tell what it is. I have my telescope and my photo lenses and so forth, but I still cannot get a close enough pic. I drive over there. I'm going to go find out what that light is.
Right.
And those pictures are here in the book. And it turns out that it is an a star. It's shaped like the Easter star, the Star of David.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Wow.
it turns out that is, in the book, I call it the city of Lenoir's mountaintop. It's not. It's actually a private mountaintop.
Right.
And so this is a private individual who turns this light on every Easter and again every Christmas.
Really?
So it's only on for a week or two during those two vacation periods.
Right. Goodness gracious. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Not surprising, though. That's not surprising. So basically, what you're saying is...
Oh, I'm just saying it's crazy that you went to that length to do it. I mean, not crazy. It's
Everything we looked
it's
at.
extensive.
Everything.
Yeah.
Right.
We tried not to leave anything unturned.
So basically, what you're saying is the Brown Mountain Lights don't have one source; they have many sources.
Yes. If you look at the reports of the Brown Mountain Lights, and we interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people, and we're through the literature, there's 325 articles that are annotated in this book about the Brown Mountain Lights. Everybody is seeing a different light.
Yeah.
And that's your first clue.
Right.
What would be thousands of different kinds of lights?
Yeah.
Well, duh, it's man-made lights.
Thousands of different kinds of lights.
Yeah.
That's exactly what... They answer their own question.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Well, I think in like investigative police work, isn't eyewitness account supposed to be like extremely unreliable?
Yeah.
Like
Absolutely.
even to the point where I'm sure it's admissible in court, but like
Not anymore.
Really?
If it's a murder case, eyewitness accounts are no longer accepted in court.
Yeah.
It has to be backed up by some factual evidence.
And Josh, it's just that, and Ed talks about this in his book, people go there, and I went there the first time I went. I wanted to see a light so bad.
Yeah.
And I looked and I strained and I thought, my brain said, ooh, that might have been something. So I said, boy, I think I saw one.
So you think it's some kind of confirmation bias?
People want to see them so bad, their mind tells them that they saw one. And you would even see people in the bottom of Linville Gorge. It would be obvious there was a campfire because they'd walk in front of it, and you'd see a silhouette, and you would still say, that was a light.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I show pictures in the book. I like telling this story. One night at Wiseman's View, that we could see a light down in Linville Gorge, and it was using a telephoto lens and a telescope. There's 6 people sitting there around that campfire with headlights on. There are visitors there that night who are talking about the Brown Mountain Light down in Linville Gorge. I invite them to look through the telescope. They refuse to do so because they don't want to know what it really is.
Right.
And on another occasion, we were doing a light test. We had Mike's, I'm trying to remember the name of his kids, but they were hiking. It was a hiking club, and he started Outward Bound. Mm-hmm. And so he had a group up at Hawksbill with lights. We had radios. We were in radio contact. And so I was at Wiseman's View with several others, and they were up there, and we would say, okay, turn lights on. Mm-hmm. So they turned the lights on. About that time, an individual who actually was a Presbyterian minister, retired, came with the group. And they saw the lights, and I could hear them talking, oh, this is the best we've ever seen. Those are Brown Mountain Lights. And I didn't want to interfere with his group, so I didn't say anything. And so later, I saw him at Walmart about 3 weeks later, and I said, I won't mention his name, but I said, that I wanted to mention that was a staged light test. We were doing that for our research team, our Brown Mountain Lights research team, and he told me, he said, no, those were actual lights. Those were Brown Mountain Lights. I know Brown Mountain Lights when I see them, is what he said. And so there was no arguing with him that was a staged light test, and that was all done purposefully.
Well, can you still man the argument that maybe you should just let people have fun out?
Yeah, and they have fun. I had a good Rotary friend, a really well-respected Rotary friend, and we did a presentation at Rotary on the Brown Mountain Lights, and he said, Alex, I've seen those lights. I know what I saw. He said, I know what you think, but I'm gonna keep my idea of the Brown Mountain Lights, and that's fine.
Right.
That's fine.
I got you. Okay, so 4 years of this that went into the book. You say the research is still going on. Not one light you couldn't explain.
No, they're actually some of the lights. We don't have enough information about them,
Right.
so we can't really.
So they are unexplained. Ah,
So,
I got you.
no. So that's my 1% unexplained lights.
Got you.
I was there with my wife and her sister and some other people. I had to go back to the truck to get a flashlight, and an orb came up right over their head and stood and then disappeared. That was an unexplained light, because we have no explanation of what that was, and there were about 20 people there that saw the same thing
Really?
Wow.
at one of the pulpits at Wiseman's View.
I got you.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike has some interviews of a lot of people and these are recorded interviews of people that have seen them. In fact, hunters have described, and we have those documented, where the lights interfered with them and scared them. And there was Paul Lao's Tower where and we've looked over there. There's a supposedly a cave where they saw lights in the back of the cave. We spent years, I think we're up to about 5 years, 6 years looking for that cave, and we've not found it.
Really?
We're still looking for it.
So there's caves all over that place, right?
They're not really caves as you would think they're caves. They're mainly rock falls.
Right.
They're ledges.
Right. Got you. Okay. So there are ones that you haven't identified, for sure.
Yes.
Like Ed said, probably 1%.
Probably about 1%. But that 1%, we're just holding on hope.
Yeah, sure. And people you can ask Ed, they get mad at us for talking about this. Well, you've ruined my idea of these mystery lights.
Well, I will say this. Listen, your enthusiasm for the topic comes through, both of you. And you wouldn't have done this for as long as you've done this and taken on something like this unless you were curious as well. I mean, it's the curiosity. I think what it is stuff like the Brown Mountain Lights, to me, it appeals to people's curiosity. It can be the the paranormal, the metaphysical, the whatever, but there's something about that in the human psyche that just never goes away.
Exactly.
And that's the reason countless things like this persist and persist.
Chase, the Presbyterian minister who I spoke with, I asked him, what do you think they are? And he said, I know what they are. He said, they're disembodied spirits.
Okay.
I've heard that argument too, actually. And it reminds me a lot of Scientology.
Xenu?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Coming
Yeah,
from the mountain. That's where Xenu.
Uh-huh.
Xenu's in the mountain over there.
Yep.
That's what it is.
Yep.
I do think it's fascinating, the whole I only heard the Jules Verne angle about the book probably about 2 years ago. That's the first time I've ever heard about that, and I would venture to say most people that know about the Legend of the Brown Mountain Lights have no idea about that book.
And we have a member, Dr. Cato Holler.
Yep.
He's an expert. He's a member of the Jules Verne Society.
Really?
He's a director of the North American Jules Verne Society.
So any idea how Jules Verne would have, did he just pick a random spot and be like, oh, or because it was Table Rock? Is that?
No, we suspect that he picked that location because he had read some of the adventure travel logs that were written by mountaineers in the 1800s that describe Table Rock and describe Linville Gorge. So Jules Verne's read those stories and then chose the inaccessible Rocky Top Mountain for the location of his
Right.
Which had a flat top.
Yeah, and at the time,
Like a door.
at the time Jules Verne wrote that book, Table Rock was inaccessible. There was no way to get to the top without rock climbing.
Right.
Now, of course, there's a paved or a maintained trail to the top.
Right.
And we've seen 30, 40, 50 people camping at the top of Table Rock.
Right.
There's one more thing I want to point out here,
Sure.
just
No problem.
to help complete the story. Most people are not aware of how easy it is for the human being to see a light at night. So here's a question I always ask for a group when I'm giving a presentation. How far can a human eye see a single candle flame at night? The brightness of lights is measured in candle power. So one flame is one candle power, 1 lumen. How far can a human being see one candle at night?
I have no idea.
don't know.
You, Josh, got a stab?
No.
You want to take a guess?
I'll take a guess. 1 lumen,
1 lumen.
5 miles.
This is a trick question. The answer is 30 miles.
Oh, wow.
That is how sensitive the human eye is. A lot of people seeing the Brown Mountain Lights, and they're seeing hundreds or thousands of lights off in the distance, are telling me, "Oh no, you can't see a man-made light that far." That we're talking 6 miles, 7 miles, 10 miles. A light bulb, a normal household 60-watt light bulb, is 800 lumen. Well, if you can see 1 lumen for 30 miles, how far are you going to be able to see a house light?
Right.
A
Good
car,
point.
Or a car light. A headlight. Yeah.
A car headlight is 2,000 to 3,000 lumens.
Well, and they make handheld flashlights now that are like 1 million lumens or whatever.
Absolutely, you're dead on right there.
Yeah.
Yes, a handheld battery-operated flashlight that's 500,000 lumen or
Right.
1 million lumen.
Right.
And another thing, Chase, is speaking of that, we haven't mentioned this. When you're at Wiseman's View, a lot of people can't distinguish the top of Brown Mountain.
Right.
So they're seeing over the top of Brown Mountain into Lenore and Morganton and don't understand they're seeing city lights.
Right.
They have no clue that that's what they're seeing.
Oh, if you go up there and spend enough time, especially at Wiseman's View, you can definitely see. Like if you're there during the day, you can see it. I mean, you can see it down there.
Yep.
So
But
I mean,
at night, these people don't understand.
yeah,
It's
you
like
got
the
tourists
people
that have never been here before
it's
in their
like-
life going to look at that. Yeah.
What Ed was saying, people that don't go into nature a lot don't understand.
Right. Right. I got you. Wow. What a fascinating subject. I have got to read this book.
So my takeaway is we all are the Brown Mountain Lights. Maybe that will satisfy the need for there to be a legend. We are the Brown Mountain Lights.
You're such a realist, Josh.
Well
I'm
said,
something.
Josh.
I'm something. I don't know. I thought when you said you're such a, I thought of like 10 words. I was like,
Right.
I shouldn't say
That could have
those.
went anywhere. Yeah.
shouldn't
Yeah, that
say
could have went
those
anywhere.
And we have a few members of our team too that still say, well, I still think it's this or that.
Right.
But the majority, I think, have agreed that most of what we're seeing are man-made lights.
Well, from what it sounds like to me, it sounds like that everybody was shocked that how many man-made lights there actually were and light sources there actually are. I mean, I
And
had
when you
no
look
idea
at
about
the-
most of the stuff.
when you look at the dates that Ed's put together, it all makes sense how it evolved.
Sure. It makes it.
and mention too about Tommy Fail's song when it occurred, and it was the first occurrence of them being in Linville Gorge. Ed.
Yes, yeah. And that was in 61, and there were no reports of...
So you're talking about the bluegrass song.
Yeah, the bluegrass song.
The Brown Mountain Lights.
So one of the biggest observation sites was Wiseman's View, which is on the west side of Linville Gorge, looking over Linville Gorge at Brown Mountain, but nobody was seeing lights down below. But after Tommy Fail's song came out, now the lights in Linville Gorge are part of the Brown Mountain Lights,
Right.
the legend. And even lights now being seen even further away are now considered Brown Mountain Lights.
Right.
That brings
So-
you back to that quote: "When the legend becomes fact, print the legend."
Yes.
Well, it's the truth. I mean, you think about it, it's the same thing with Bigfoot. It's
Yeah.
the same thing with, I mean, you're in the middle of the woods late at night. You see an upright what appears to be a hominid creature walking a shadow of something that looks like it's dark and you don't know what it is, your mind's going to fill in the blanks with whatever.
Well, that's what our brains
because that's
do.
terrifying, number one. And imagine going back to the fireflies. Imagine if you saw that. You'd be like, oh, my God, aliens or spirits or something are out here.
Yeah, that's
you
what
know?
our brains do. They
when
fill
we
in information.
when we first started looking for the blue ghost firefly, we went up to the Good Cemetery off the Parkway, and there they were everywhere.
Really?
And then I went in my backyard in Little Switzerland in the woods, turned off my lights. They were everywhere, but they're only lighting about 2 or 3 weeks during June. About right now, aren't they, Ed?
Right.
Yes, yeah, they're very temperature sensitive. So only for a few weeks out of the year.
And they're
see
looking
them.
for only the male flies. The female is a larva on the ground, so the male is flying around trying to attract the female on the ground.
Wow.
I love what you said though about how shocked a lot of your teammates were working on this project, because I feel like good science does shock people.
Oh, absolutely.
Good science, when it's done correctly, that the outcome, when you follow the truth wherever it leads, it does shock people.
Well, and that's, to me, that's the reason, and you guys weigh in, because I'm not a scientist. You are, Josh, but I'm not. You know, it seems to me that whenever good science is conducted, like you say, and this is the reason science is important, because you end up finding so many other things that you didn't expect to find.
Yeah.
I mean, did you ever, when you started this, did you ever expect to go this far deep into this?
No. As a scientist, when I started the detailed study of the Brown Mountain Lights, I thought that it's not going to take us long, and we're going to identify and prove a new source of light, a new type of light, because all of these people for 120 years can't be wrong.
Right.
But they are. So it was a shock that we did not find what we expected to find.
Right. But you found a lot of stuff, enough to put together an incredible book.
And
Yes.
Charles Braswell has a good book too, and so those are 2 of the most recent books available.
I believe so. Well, you know, I was looking on YouTube and stuff when we were leading up to this, and when we were talking about it, you know, a month or so back when I first reached out to you guys. It's not stopping. There's new videos.
Oh, I know.
There was a fairly extensive one by a guy that was only, I think, a couple months old, I believe, and a very extensive look at it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Ed mentioned to Chase and Josh about the fella from Germany coming here to do some studies.
Yeah, well, the Brown Mountain Lights are known all over the world.
Sure.
So it draws people's attention from around the world. And recently we had a guy, I can't remember his name now, but he came from Germany just to see and photograph the Brown Mountain Lights. And so he spent almost a month here. And I spent several nights with him photographing the lights from Wiseman's View. And then I actually did a stage light test for him on top of Hawksbill. He was looking for confirmation that natural lights exist. He had already written a book about a light event in Russia, which was back in the 60s, and it's a tragic case of where I think it was 9 campers were all in the same tent, camping on the side of a snow-covered mountain in Russia.
you're talking about the what is the name of that incident? Look that up. It's Russian camping accident. It'll come up. Dyatlov Pass.
Dyatlov.
The
that's
Dyatlov Pass. I knew it'd come to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so this guy wrote a book about that,
Yeah.
in which he concluded that it was a natural plasma light, a hot burning gas, and that's the light that scared these hikers. So they all got up and ran from their tent without. It's 30 below zero, and they didn't take any gear with them. They didn't take any of their boots or their clothing. They got up in such a hurry and took off running, and they all died.
Yeah.
But none of them returned to the tent. even though they were only a short distance away by the time they stopped because of the snow and the cold. But still, there was something at the tent site that scared them, and they would not return to the tent. So this author had written that he just concluded that it was a natural light, and so he's now looking for confirmation that these hot plasma lights exist in other places around the world. And so he was over here looking at the Brown Mountain Lights.
Yeah, that's a fascinating case right there.
This is from Smithsonian Magazine. So in February 1959, university student Mikhail Sharavin made an unexpected discovery on the slopes of the Ural Mountains. Dispatched as a member of a search party investigating a group of 9 experienced hikers disappearing, Sharavin and his fellow rescuers spotted the corner of a tent peeking out beneath the snow. Okay.
I can give you a brief synopsis of this.
Yeah. Go for it.
So, I'm a little familiar with this. So, there was 9 hikers. They, when they found them, they had all left their tent, and didn't take the things that you would think would be necessary in 30 degree or 30 below weather. There, most of them, I think, were found barefoot and all that. And then the other weird thing was there were some weird anomalies with their eyes had been gouged out and like some pretty morbid stuff like that, which I think probably a whole lot of that they attribute to animals and things like that. But there was a light reported that was associated with that. Some of the local villagers had reported basically, I think it was like a mass reporting of a bright light that was on that slope of that mountain that night. And of course that made its way into the whole alien mythology and all this type of stuff. So, you see these types of things, they're not unique by any means, they're not unique.
They certainly aren't.
No.
But they're interesting.
So my last question, and I don't know why I didn't ask this earlier, but have you ever had any interest at looking in some of these other lights, like the Marfa light and all that type of stuff?
Yes, and I've certainly read some of the stuff that's available.
Right.
I think a lot of
the Spalding light. That's another one, right?
Yeah. The Spalding light. I think the research we did on the Brown Mountain Lights covers a lot of mystery light sightings.
Yeah, I got you. Have you ever had any interest in actually going and taking a look?
Of course, you bet.
It sounds like this is a passion of yours, so I think you just need to. I look forward to the next book, Ed. Come on, man, let's go.
When are you writing your second book?
Yeah.
I have no plans right now.
Right, I gotcha. Oh well, listen, this has been phenomenal. I love these are I've said it a million times. These are my favorite types of podcasts that we do. I love this type of stuff, and thank you guys so much.
Well, thanks for setting this up and inviting us.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it again. Alex, second time. You're the first 2-time guest on the podcast, Alex.
Thank you.
Yeah. Our first and one of our best still to date. Let's rep the book again. This is The Brown Mountain Lights, History, Science, and Human Nature Explained in Appalachian Mystery. Ed, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Ed, where can people find your book?
If you search online, all of the booksellers have access to it.
Yeah, I saw it was on Amazon and Google Books. Amazon had the Kindle version available as well, so that was cool. I'm going to pick that up.
Yeah, I got to get a copy too. I got to get with you and let you sign it.
If you'll let me pay for this one, I'll have you sign it.
Okay.
That'd be okay.
All right.
But awesome! Thank you so much. You mind if I get Alex's on there too?
No,
that's it. That's it.
Let this one just be Ed's.
He worked really hard on that.
Obviously, and I mean, I like I said, I hate that I didn't get a chance to delve deep into it before this, but from what little I've read and stuff, this is a deep dive into something, and obviously well done. Well done.
Yeah, if you can read through that book, you could get through anything.
Gotcha. Josh, send us away here, Bo.
Yeah. Guys, thank you so much. I love podcasts where I just sit and listen. They're seriously my favorite. I don't want to hear myself talk. I want to hear y'all talk, and this has been fantastic. Everybody, go check out shophollercast.com. Buy our merchandise. I don't have any right here with me. Normally I do.
We forgot to bring the mugs.
Yeah, we forgot to bring the mugs out. But I do have a pair of gym shorts on order. So, yeah, shophollercast.com. Use the code HollerCast to get 10% off of your orders. Check out our sponsors. They mean the world to us because they are what makes this possible. And us doing it, that makes it possible too. But,
and good guests.
And good, amazing guests.
Amazing guests.
But yeah, please like the video, share the video far and wide. We want to get this stuff out here. There's so much good information in here about the Brown Mountain Lights, and I love that we are explaining what they are. And they are, as I suspected all along, there is a reasonable scientific explanation for them. So please share out this video.
Maybe.
Like, subscribe.
Maybe a scientific explanation.
There is.
There's still hope.
I'm gonna pop that bubble. I'm okay with definitively saying that. We love you all. We'll see you again next time. Until then, peace out.